Hello again everyone, it's me Matt, hope you're having a wonderful day. We're talking about air defense today, and this monstrosity in front of us known as the Shilka. What an incredible vehicle that it is with those four 23mm cannons. I can tell you this much, I would not want to be a low-flying aircraft or helicopter back in the days of which this thing was covering the local airspace. And of course this vehicle is still being upgraded today. It's a Soviet-style era vehicle, and air defense from Russia is always being manipulated into some very strange concoctions, and this is no exception to that matter. We need to talk a little bit about the early years of Soviet air defense before we get into the full overview of this vehicle today. Following the Russo-Finnish War of 1940, the Red Army rebranded its existing air defense directorate into the Main Administration of the Air Defense Force, or GU-PVO. However, the GU-PVO only took responsibility for training and equipping their air defense units. Command and operational control of these units remained with the Soviet military districts. This reorganization, however, proved to be of little consequence. The Germans had already begun conducting aerial reconnaissance missions over the Russian borderlands to prepare for Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's bold invasion of the Soviet Union in the following year. On August 14, 1939, days before the start of World War II, the German and Soviet foreign ministers, Ribbentrop and Molotov, had signed a non-aggression pact. Hitler, however, did not intend of abiding by the agreement and ordered the reconnaissance flights to identify the weaknesses along the western frontier of the Soviet Union. Thus, by the time the Germans invaded in June 1941, the Luftwaffe was able to destroy much of the Soviet Air Force when it was actually still on the ground. Of course, though, the Council of Ministers adopted the Resolution 426-11, which called for the simultaneous development of two all-weather radar-guided air defense platforms. These parallel designs were the ZSU-23-2, known as the Yensei, and the ZSU-23-4, known as the Shilka. The idea was that the Yensei would provide mobile air defense for armored formations, while the Shilka would provide cover for motorized infantry units. The ZSU-23-2 was developed at Experimental Design Bureau No. 16 in Moscow and featured twin 37mm autocannons. Its chassis was similar to that of the Su-100 self-propelled field gun, and its armor could withstand about 7.62mm worth of gunfire with ranges up to about 400 meters, so not very much. The Yensei's effective firing range was comparable to the ZSU-57-2. During field tests, Soviet evaluators determined that the guns could fire 150 rounds in continuous burst, followed by that of a 30-second cool-off period to keep the barrel from overheating. Meanwhile, however, the ZSU-23-4 was based on the chassis of the PT-76 light amphibious tank. The ZSU-23-4 is a statement that is a 23mm cannon multiplied by 4 of its derivative. Its armoured skin was made up of welded steel varying in thickness from 9.2mm in the turret to 15mm in the hull, which really isn't very much. This configuration gave the ZSU-23-4 quite reasonable protection for a variety of NATO small arms, however indirect fire was quite incapable of being protected from. Its power plant was an 8-cylinder, 6-stroke, 20-litre engine capable of producing 280 horsepower, which could propel the vehicle at a top road speed of around 50 km an hour, and a maximum off-road speed of 30 km an hour, which is pretty respectable. Despite its girth, the prototype ZSU-23-4 was highly maneuverable, with operational ranges of up to 450 miles. It could engage targets effectively whilst driving on inclines of up to 30 degrees, and could ford water obstacles at depths of up to 1 meter. The vehicle itself weighed 19 metric tons and accommodated a crew of 4, a driver, commander, gunner, and radar operator. The prototypes for the ZSU-37-2 and ZSU-23-4 were completed in December 1960, with field tests continuing until 1961. However, after these parallel field trials, the Council of Ministers determined that the ZSU-23-4's burst-to-kill ratio was nearly twice as high as the ZSU-37-2. Although the Yensei had a greater effective range and its manufacturing costs were comparable to Shilka, the Council adopted the Shilka on September 5, 1962, and further work on the Yensei was terminated. After 2 more years of the refinement and recalibration, the first ZSU-23-4 was delivered to the Soviet Army in 1965. Although full-scale production ended in 1984, the vehicle remains in service with the Russian ground forces, Russian Marines, and other militaries around the world of more than 30 different countries. The quad-mounted 23mm 2A7 guns are among the most distinctive features of this weapon system. These autocannons fire a standard steel-cased 23 by 152mm bullet at a muzzle velocity of around 970 meters a second. The singular 2A7 has a cycle rate of around 850, to 1,000 rounds per minute, giving it perfect capability for knocking aircraft out of the sky. The ZSU-23-4 typically carries two classes of ammunition, high explosive and armoured piercing. This gives the quad gun a capability of firing a high round capability of 3,000 to 4,000 rounds per minute, but due to the high amount of explosives that are inside some of the rounds, the cooling principle is very key here, hence bursting of the ammunition and firing is very key. The ZSU's ammunition belt contains 40 HE and 10 AP rounds. Fired horizontally, the 2A7 guns have a maximum range of around 7 km or 4.3 miles. Their maximum vertical range is 5.1 km or 3.2 miles, with an effective range of 1 to 2.5 km. This gun battery gave the ZSU-23-4 more lethality than its closest American counterpart, the M163 Vulcan air defense system known as the VADS. As a baseline measurement, a ZSU-23-4 firing a 40-round burst against an F-4 Phantom in level fight with a range of 1 km had a kill burst probability of 0.13. The VADS, firing at a MiG-21 with a 60-round burst under the same conditions, had a kill burst probability of only 0.08. By comparison, this gave the ZSU a greater effective range of 66% and made it almost 50% more accurate in air defense capabilities. In field tests and in combat, the ZSU-23-4 performed most effectively against, obviously, attack helicopters. But the kill per burst probability depended on three things: the target range, the ZSU's exposure time, and the maneuverability of the target. Naturally, hovering targets were easier to engage than those that were maneuverable, but for either type of target, the ZSUs actually dropped off considerably beyond 2,500 meters. Still, at ranges of 1 to 3 kilometers, the Shilka had a higher kill per burst probability, so long as its exposure time did not exceed 50 seconds. During field tests, a helicopter versus Shilka engagement had the helicopter unmasked from behind a hill, acquire the ZSU in its sights, fire its missile, and track the missile's trajectory to the target. Altogether, this process took the pilot 60 to 90 seconds to complete. However, the ZSU's battle drill, including target acquisition, firing, and rounds to target, took as little as 25 seconds. The ZSU-23-4 Shilka was the most popular self-propelled anti-aircraft gun produced by the Soviet Union, and arguably the most fearsome of the Cold War period. Featuring the 423mm guns and the revolutionary radar tracking system of its time, it really did catch the West off guard. Several NATO publications were dedicated to showing pilots exactly how to defeat or at least mitigate the threat from the ZSU's radar and capabilities. Like its predecessor, the ZSU-57-2, the Shilka was exported to the Middle East and member nations of the Warsaw Pact. Along the Iron Curtain during the Gulf War, some commanders considered the Shilka such a grave threat that they ordered their tank crews to destroy it before actually engaging enemy tanks. The vehicle system really was very good at being able to replace some of the older weapon systems. For a time, she was fielded alongside the outgoing ZSU-57-2 until her own numbers increased. She was used to protect the vast portions of Soviet airspace, applying point defense for all types of military value targets, and could create a lethal defensive, quote, umbrella when coupled with the mobile, medium, long-range anti-aircraft missile systems. Should enemy aircraft evade or try to avoid these missile systems, it would have had to have the Shilka to contend with. Even over time, Shilka's system has survived to be still feared by melee pilots around the world. Her rapid-fire cannons deliver a potent stream of those 23mm ammunition bursts, and integrated radar systems really make it very accurate as a gunnery platform with established ranges. The tracking nature means that she can be stationed just about anywhere and can also supply support fire when these armoured units are on the move. Today, modernised Shilkas have been upgraded with short-range anti-aircraft missile launchers that increase the system's lethality to somewhat of an extent. This makes it even more of a complete defense package. These launchers are fitted to the side of the turrets and on the roof to work alongside the battery of the cannon. If the Shilka series maintains some inherent limitations, it is in her use of the water-cooled cannons. Her inherently short-range nature and lack of armor protection from modern portable anti-tank weapons are definitely a key weakness. However, it's really a testament to the design of the vehicle that it still maintains somewhat of a battlefield profile even today. From the late 1960s to today, the weapon system has gone to prove her worth seeing extensive action during just about every war you can think of. The vehicle has only existed in a few notable variants, and many of these have been subtle upgrades and modernizations of previous Shilka generations. There are lots of different variants, and I won't go through them today because I'll just be here all day, but for the most part it's an upgrade to either the weapon system itself, the driveline, the engine, the turret, or the radar system. In terms of configuration, a large turret is mounted to the centre of the chassis. The commander, gunner and range operator are seated in the large square turret. The guns and ammunition are in the forward part of the turret and separated from the crew by a gas-tight and armoured bulkhead. Access to the gun and ammunition is via two large hatches, one either side of the turret roof, which are hinged at the centre and open vertically. The all-welded hull of the vehicle is divided into three compartments: driver at the front, combat at the centre and engine at the rear. The armour protection is 15mm at 55 degrees for the glacis plate, hull sides, and 10mm for the rear hull and side of the turret. The vehicle itself, based upon the GM575 track vehicle chassis, used components of the PT-76 light amphibious tank. The engine and transmission are at the rear of the hull and is the DG4M1 gas turbine engine coupled to a manual gearbox with 5 forward gears and 1 reverse. The torsion bar suspension system consists of 6 single rubber tired road wheels with an idler at the front and a drive sprocket at the rear, and there are no track return rollers. The ZSU-23-4 Shilka is equipped with an MBC system with an air filtration unit, firefighting equipment, and the TNA-2 navigational system. It also has an infrared vision device, an R123 radio set, and an R124 intercom and electronic power supply system, taking power from the generator, which is a direct current generator from the DG4M1 single shaft turbine gas engine. A platoon of 4 Shilkas is assigned, along with 4 SA-9 Gaskin SAM systems, to the anti-aircraft battery of motorized rifle and tank regiments to cover the dead space of the SA-6 Gainful in the Division of Air Defence umbrellas. 2 Shilkas usually will be in support of each other of the first 2 echelon battalions, each weapon normally separated by 200 meters, typically travelling 400 meters behind the battalion's leading elements. By 2014, the Shilka was still in service with 39 countries. It was also used in the 1980s to develop the Tunguska air defense system, the forerunner of the contemporary Pantsir S-1, which is armed with short to medium range surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery systems. So, there you have it folks, the Shilka anti-aircraft weapon system. What a beast. 4 of those 23mm cannons with AP and high explosive rounds, and potentially even rockets on the side, is a little terrifying for I'm sure any pilot back in the Soviet era, and I'm sure many pilots still today that are coming against it in its modified variants. The interesting thing about this vehicle is it doesn't require any armour. The sheer firepower that this thing can put down and the amount of armour that's surrounding it in the support that it's providing to, it doesn't need heavy amounts of armour. One of the biggest weaknesses though is definitely artillery fire. If it does have any indirect weapon system to engage it, it's going to have a hard time trying to defend itself. But let's be honest here, most of the artillery is already going to be engaged by other artillery of the Soviet era in that time, before it even goes anywhere near the battlefield and gets risk to it. The modified versions of this vehicle is interesting, considering that Tunguska and Pantsir is really kind of taking the spotlight, I guess, when it comes to air defense systems today, but they're still putting little nooks and crannies all over this thing to try and modify it to today's standards. I definitely feel like it has a strong capability of still being used today. We still have, low-flying helos, we still have low-flying aircraft that if you weren't paying attention, you were caught off guard by this thing, it would knock you right out of the sky. The amount of firepower this thing can put down range is definitely one of its strong points, but also one of its weaknesses. Those water-cooled cannons will eventually overheat, and I would not want to have a misfire happening within the barrel of those 4 guns as you're putting full salvos of up to 1,000 rounds per minute down range. Little scary. The radar that's being upgraded is interesting. Of course, I couldn't find any real information on how that system really works, and I'm sure I would bore you all to death talking about it anyway, but it is interesting how they are modernizing the platform to keep it into the spectrum of knocking out sort of more high-end tactical aircrafts, Apache Longbow, all that sort of stuff. They're really trying to get with the times with this system, because it is, in its sense, basically just an anti-aircraft gun with a turret. It's nothing too fancy. The tracking, of course, in its olden days is very primitive as to what we have today, but, it's still a formidable air defense system and something I would definitely not want to be put up against. I hope you learned a little bit about the ZSU-23-4 today, and if I did make any mistakes, I do apologize. Please feel free to correct me in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video, please leave me a like, and if you want to be notified of any upcoming content in the future, please feel free to hit the bell by the subscribe button so you can be notified for next time. Those of you who have been contributing towards my Patreon page, thank you so much, and everyone who has been contributing towards my CVRT crowdfund dream CVRT tank fund, I guess. It's not really a tank. For those who really don't know what a CVRT is, it could be classified somewhat as a tank. But I'm basically looking into getting my own tracked vehicle for the future. I'm a long way away from it yet, but definitely a dream that a lot of you have been helping to contribute support to, so thank you so much for doing so. Maybe one day you'll see me riding around in my own tracked vehicle here in beautiful Canada. Anyway, thank you again for coming by today on today's video, and I will hopefully see you on the next one. All the best. Bye-bye.